This boy's life is truly heartbreaking. Abandoned right at birth, he was eventually taken in and raised by a kind-hearted couple. But fate wasn't done with him yet. At just 4 years old, he was diagnosed with autism. A year later, tragedy struck again when his mother passed away from cancer. To dedicate his life to caring for him, his father walked away from his career to start a very unique business, a company that handles the belongings and legacies of those who have moved on to the next world. And so, father and son lived and worked side by side. This young man's name is Geu Roo. Every time he returns home, Geu Roo places his hat in the exact same spot. Inside the refrigerator, everything is organized in perfect straight lines. Even something as simple as a fried egg can cause him immense anxiety if the yolk isn't perfectly round and intact. But his father has long been used to this. You see, Geu Roo has Asperger's syndrome. He often struggles to understand human emotions or social cues, and he absolutely cannot stand it when established rules are changed. Because of this, throughout his entire life, the only person who stayed by his side as a friend was Suji, the girl living in the house right across the street. But life has a way of being fair. While one door closed, an incredible new advantage opened up. Geu Roo possesses extraordinary observation skills and a memory that is truly next level. At the aquarium, he can remember every single type of fish. He can even close his eyes and list off entire fish lineages. In fact, if he points out a fish that needs medical treatment, the manager there will send someone to check on it immediately, because they know Geu Roo is never wrong. Today, the father and son take on a mission to clear out the belongings of a young man who was handsome, filial, but unfortunately, gone too soon. This young man spent almost all of his time working to save money, hoping to provide for his parents in the future. Yet, at the most beautiful age of his life, he had to leave this world behind. Inside his tiny, cramped room, the father and son used the items left behind to piece together his story. This young man had just graduated from high school and started working at a nearby factory, all while preparing for college entrance exams with the dream of becoming a permanent employee. As for Geu Roo, how did he figure out the young man's habits and tastes? It was because he discovered a stack of convenience store receipts in a drawer. From those, Geu Roo deduced that the deceased often bought instant noodles and rice balls, assuming it was because he liked them. He also found a bottle of body spray in a bag, which suggested the man was sensitive to smells. While searching further, he found an ID badge in the drawer, revealing the young man's name, Seon Yu. After hearing his son's reasoning, the father praised his observation skills but gently refined the conclusion, adding a much deeper layer of emotion to it. The father said to Geu Roo, "The reason this young man ate so many instant noodles wasn't because he liked them, it was simply because he was too busy. He didn't have time for a proper meal, so noodles were his only option. Buying rice balls that were about to expire was just a way for him to save money. And that body spray along with the nail clippers, those were to hide the smell of sweat and the dirt under his fingernails. It shows that he was someone who truly valued cleanliness and dignity." Geu Roo took his father's explanation to heart. Then the father took out the young man's savings book and added, "He loved his parents very much. Every single deposit was dedicated to them, with notes expressing his hope that once he became a full-time employee, his parents could finally live a comfortable and peaceful life." The small rented room is quickly cleaned until it's spotless, and every trace left behind by the deceased is wiped away. The father and son finally finish their work. As they are leaving, the father asks the manager for the phone number of the young man's parents to return his keepsakes, only to find out that they will be appearing at the funeral. On their way to the funeral home, their car pulls up to an intersection. At that moment, Geu Roo points toward a convenience store across the street and says, "This is the store where that young man used to shop." The father, Jiang-yu, looks over and sees a girl working busily at the cash register. Suddenly, he remembers the body spray and the nail clippers in Seon-yu's bag. It hits him the poor boy likely prepared those things just to look and smell his best for this girl. It turns out that among these few belongings there was a hidden, unrequited love story. With heavy hearts, the father and son bring the keepsakes to Seon-yu's funeral. There, they see a factory official using a pen and paper to communicate with the young man's parents, who are both deaf and mute. The factory representative heartlessly claims that because Seon-yu passed away in his rented room, it cannot be classified as a workplace accident. At the same time, he argues that since Seon-yu didn't show up for work while he was injured, it counts as him quitting his job. After saying his piece, the official just shoves a tiny, measly amount of money at them to get it over with. When Seon-yu's mother receives her son's belongings, she discovers the true cause of his death through his text messages with the factory management. It turns out that on that fateful night, a machine broke down, and the boss ordered Seon-yu to go to the factory to fix it all by himself. It was during this repair that the machine malfunctioned and crushed Seon-yu's leg, causing a severe injury. After being hurt, Seon-yu desperately wanted to ask for leave to go to the hospital, but the boss refused. He even warned Seon-yu not to dare call it a workplace accident, or he would be fired. Because of this, his injury became critically worse, leading to an infection that took his life while he was all alone. After reading the messages, Seon-yu's mother breaks down, trembling and sobbing in gut-wrenching agony. After the memorial service, the guests are served a meal. At this time, the father and son overhear the factory leaders sitting nearby, bad-mouthing Seon-yu's parents. They are actually laughing and gloating, relieved that the parents are deaf and mute, thinking they won't be able to stay persistent and demand compensation. These heartless words fill Jang-woo with absolute rage. He tells his son to go outside first, then marches over to the factory leader, drags him in front of Seon-yu's parents, and uses sign language to tell them, "These people are Seon-yu's former colleagues. If you have anything to say to them, you can say it now." With a broken heart, Seon-yu's mother uses sign language to pour out her soul, while Jeong-yu stands in the middle acting as her interpreter. She explains that because their family was poor, Seon-yu started working very early. The boy cherished this opportunity so much that he always worked his hardest to repay the company, hoping that one day he would be promoted to a permanent employee. But the management didn't see him as a human being. They treated him like a machine and didn't care about his feelings at all. In a powerful moment of dignity, Seon-yu's mother returns the funeral money to the factory leader, telling them that even if she were to die, she would never accept money exchanged for the life of her son. Meanwhile, Geu Roo is sitting outside waiting for his father. Suddenly, a nurse catches his attention and he begins to follow her all the way to the hospital. When the nurse realizes someone is tailing her, she screams out a warning, which terrifies Geu Roo. In a state of panic, he begins to frantically recite the names of sea creatures over and over until Jong-gu rushes to his side. It's only then that the father understands the truth. The reason Geu Roo followed the nurse was because he wanted to ask for a medical badge to offer as a tribute to Seon-yu. When Jong-yu hears the truth, he pulls his son into a tight emotional hug before they head back to the funeral home. There, Geu Roo takes a small badge that reads "Beloved Son" and carefully pins it onto Seon-yu's backpack. Because Jong-yu has an urgent meeting with a lawyer, Geu Roo decides to stay behind at the hospital to look at the fish in the aquarium. He stands there, completely captivated by the fish, having no idea that this would be the very last time he would ever see his father. While crossing the street, his father suddenly suffers a massive heart attack. Sensing that his time is running out, he pulls out his phone to call his son one last time, telling Geu Roo how much he loves him and promising that someone will be there to take care of him. When Geu Roo answers, he immediately knows something is terribly wrong. He becomes uncontrollably agitated, losing his composure and frantically reciting the names of different sea creatures over and over again. After struggling to regain his calm, Geu Roo gathers all his courage and does something he's never done before. He gets behind the wheel and drives, desperate to see his father one last time. Since this is his first time driving, he's incredibly tense. Geu Roo drives at a snail's pace on the highway, and because he's going so slowly, he starts to hold up the traffic behind him. A truck driver behind him eventually swerves past, shouting insults and cursing at Geu Roo. To make matters worse, as the truck speeds by, a stray plastic bag flies up and completely blocks Geu Roo's vision. Terrified, he slams on the brakes for an emergency stop. The traffic police follow him and demand he open the door, but by this point, Geu Roo has spiraled into a total panic, covering his ears to shut out the world. At that exact same moment, back at the hospital, his father is undergoing emergency resuscitation, but he stops breathing. He has officially left this world. Suddenly, a girl with brown hair appears. It's Namu, the neighbor from across the street. She throws her arms around Geu Roo, sobbing uncontrollably as she delivers the news that his father has passed away. In just a few short minutes, Geu Roo has lost the person he loves most in the world. Despite his crushing grief, Geu Roo holds onto his father's words. Dad is always right by your side. Because of that, he tries his best to maintain his normal daily routine, comforting himself with the thought that his father is still right there with him. The very next day, a guest shows up who completely turns Geu Roo's life upside down. This guy looks like a total thug who just stepped out of prison. His name is Sang-gu, and he's actually Geu Roo's biological uncle. However, he is the polar opposite of his gentle and refined older brother. Sang-gu has a tough guy energy that radiates danger. The moment he sits down, he starts puffing away on a cigarette, much to the horror of Geu Roo and Namu. Because Geu Roo has autism and a severe case of OCD regarding cleanliness, he can't stand the smell of smoke or Sang-gu's messy, chaotic attitude. To say their first meeting was unforgettable would be an understatement. Luckily, a lawyer arrives at the house to explain exactly who this uncle is. It turns out that the moment Sang-gu was released from prison, Jong-gu's lawyer was already waiting for him to deliver the news. Following Jong-gu's death, Sang-gu has been named Geu Roo's legal guardian. But Sang-gu is nothing but a drifter. As soon as he hears that Geu Roo has autism, he flat out refuses to take part in the will. He heads straight to a boxing club, hoping to return to his old life as a fighter. However, Sang-gu soon learns that as a guardian, he would have the power to manage and dispose of the deceased's assets however he sees fit. Once he hears this, his attitude changes instantly, and he marches back to the lawyer's office to accept his duties under Jong-gu's will. There's a catch though. To become the official legal guardian, Sang-gu must complete 2 requirements. First, he has to live in the same house as Geu Roo for 3 months, and second, he must take over the family company, move to heaven. The conditions didn't seem too bad at all. Basically an easy work, high pay kind of deal, so Sang-gu agreed. The lawyer brings him to Geu Roo's house and introduces him. This is Sang-gu, Jong-gu's half-brother, who is now Geu Roo's future guardian and the newest employee of the company. As for Geu Roo, he's a bit uneasy with this uncle's sudden arrival. For years, he only ever lived with his dad and had no idea he even had such a tough-looking uncle. Well, they had to try to live together in peace. But of course, that's easier said than done because reality is a lot harsher. These two are worlds apart. Geu Roo has to put on full protective gear the moment his uncle moves in because Sang-gu's messy lifestyle makes him feel incredibly uncomfortable. Because of this, Sang-gu is only allowed to sleep in a tent in the middle of the living room. He's actually quite surprised by his nephew's personality. At first glance, the kid seems like an eccentric loner, but he actually has very firm principles. The next day, Geu Roo takes on a new mission. For the first time, he has to stand on his own 2 feet without his father by his side. Namu feels uneasy about it, so she forces Sang-gu to be Geu Roo's driver. Even though the uncle isn't interested, he reluctantly complies. figuring he'll just do his duty for 3 months and then they can go their separate ways. On the road, Sang-Goo shows off some crazy drifting skills, swinging the steering wheel so hard that Geu Roo nearly loses his soul from fright. Today's mission is to clean the room of an elderly woman named Mrs. Lee. She had been passed away for nearly a month before she was discovered, so the room is filled with a foul, decomposing smell. The uncle almost loses his lunch the moment he steps inside, but Geu Roo is already used to it. He calmly begins to clean and collect the keepsakes. During the cleanup, Geu Roo discovers a stack of bank receipts and a pile of cash hidden under the mattress, but the bills are all stained from the decomposing body. The woman's greedy relatives want the money, but they're too grossed out to touch it. Talk about being greedy and lazy at the same time. Geu Roo tells them to let him handle it. He'll take the money home, clean it, and then they can take it to the bank to exchange for new bills. The couple agrees instantly, but not before threatening him that they've already counted every cent. After the cleanup is done, Geu Roo tries to hand over the box of keepsakes to the family, but they've already vanished. The uncle wonders why he's still holding on to that yellow box when the family made it clear they only wanted the money, not the memories. However, Geu Roo is adamant. The belongings of the deceased must be returned to their loved ones. Geu Roo puts the box in the back of the car, but the uncle, being a jerk, intentionally tosses it into a passing garbage truck. That night, while the uncle is still traumatized by the stench of the crime scene, Geu Roo is focused on analyzing the situation. He's convinced that the old lady had a final wish left unfulfilled. He meticulously cleans the dirty money and dries it out. Looking at the pile of cash, he realizes they are all 50-01 bills, which perfectly match the withdrawal receipts he found. Geu Roo immediately heads to the bank to verify this and learns that the old lady came in every single week to withdraw exactly 50-01. Afterward, she would use the payphone to make a call, only to hang up hurriedly every time. Because this happened every day, the bank staff all knew her, though she seemed to suffer from dementia and could never remember anything when they asked. Geu Roo walks over to the payphone the old lady used to use, and a phone number from a slip of paper flashes in his mind. It seems she wanted to use this money to buy something special for a loved one. He dials the number, but when someone picks up, he gets confused and hangs up immediately. Then, Geu Roo bolts out of the bank, desperately searching for something in the surrounding area. Sang-Goo waited and waited at the bank entrance, but his nephew was nowhere to be found, so he eventually gave up and went home alone. When Namu saw that Sang-Goo had lost Geu Roo, she went absolutely ballistic, but Sang-Goo wasn't about to back down and argued right back. Just then, Geu Roo returned home and announced that he wanted to hand over the keepsakes to the old lady's family in person. That's when everyone realized the box of memories had grown wings and flown away. The culprit? None other than Sang-Goo himself. Knowing he'd never hear the end of it unless he found that box, Sang-Goo had no choice but to drive his nephew and the girl next door to track it down. After questioning the trash collectors from that day, they learned the box was sitting somewhere in the central landfill. Sang-Goo looked at that massive mountain of trash and cursed his own stupidity. Talk about self-inflicted karma. And so, the three of them began their grueling journey to find that one yellow box in the middle of a giant dump. After a long time spent digging through the filth, the uncle finally spotted the box. But before he could even celebrate, his nephew snatched it away and took off to find the old lady's son to return it. The son thought Geu Roo was there to bring him more money. So he was incredibly excited, but it wasn't going to be that easy. Geu Roo started lecturing him about how Mrs. Lee saved that money not for herself, but for a beautiful purpose. And he scolded the man for being the kind of son who didn't understand his own mother's heart. Getting called out like that made the son's blood boil instantly. After a brief struggle, Geu Roo got scared and bolted, with everyone else hot on his heels. The whole group went charging past a tailor shop, making such a loud scene that they caught the owner's attention. He took one look at Mrs. Lee's son and recognized him immediately because he had eyes just like his mother's. The tailor invited them all inside. It was there that the ungrateful son finally learned the truth. His mother had always wanted to buy him a high-end suit as a gift, but because they were expensive, she never had enough. That's why she withdrew 50-01 every single day to save up for that one special gift, but she ran out of time. The son lost his mind and slammed the yellow box onto the ground, screaming, "I told you I only want the money! Why do you people keep forcing these emotions on me?" As the box hit the floor, the contents spilled everywhere. And then, he saw the thermal undershirt he had given his mother years ago, still in perfect, brand new condition. To that elderly mother, a simple gift from her son was a treasure, and she had silently saved every penny she had to give a suit back to him. Yet, even after she died, all her son cared about was the cash. Seeing the shirt he gave her held so dearly all those years, the son hugged it tight as a wave of gut-wrenching regret washed over him. He collapsed onto the ground and sobbed like a little child. He had completely forgotten how much his mother had sacrificed and suffered for him, while he had behaved like a truly heartless son. Having finally delivered the keepsakes, Geu Roo felt a sense of peace. Even Uncle Sang-Goo was left in awe of his nephew's incredible dedication to the job. Namu was dying to know how he knew Mrs. Lee wanted to buy a suit in the first place. The young man simply replied that he had found a bill with the words "money for son's suit" written on it, so he used Google Maps to look up every tailor shop in the neighborhood and asked around for more information. On the other hand, the uncle, Sang-Goo, who just got out of prison, seemed like he was ready to turn over a new leaf. But, as it turns out, he's still being dragged back into a world of crime. One evening, Namu accidentally spots her friend's uncle getting into a high-end luxury car. Inside is a mysterious woman who clearly holds some kind of leverage over him. She demands that he return to the boxing ring to make money. It turns out, Sang-gu owes her a massive debt that he can't pay back, forcing him to literally put his life on the line for cash. The scene shifts, and we see the uncle standing shirtless, showing off a ripped six-pack as he steps into the ring with total confidence. He looks like a seasoned pro who's done this 1,000 times. We also learn the dark reason he went to prison in the first place. He accidentally killed someone during a fight. But this time, in the ring, he doesn't even throw a punch, he just stands there and lets his opponent pummel him until he collapses onto the floor. The next morning, Sang-gu limps home with his face completely battered and bruised. Geu Roo, who was worried sick because his uncle didn't come home last night, stares at the wounds. He starts coming up with theories about what happened, but a new mission quickly arrives, distracting him from his uncle's secret life. Today, the uncle-nephew duo and their neighbor Namu head out to clear the belongings of a kindergarten teacher who was tragically killed during a physical altercation with her ex-boyfriend. Since the room is an active crime scene, the cleanup process is going to take a very long time. After assessing the situation, the three of them immediately get to work. Geu Roo pays his respects at the spot where the victim died before starting the cleanup. This case had been all over the news. During his interrogation, the ex-boyfriend claimed that on the night of the crime he only went to her place to try and get back together. He lied and said she became agitated and threatened him with a knife. He claimed that while he was trying to wrestle the knife away, he accidentally stabbed her. He even insisted that he called for an ambulance immediately, but it was too late to save her. Meanwhile, the neighbors are being incredibly heartless. The only thing they care about is whether the incident will drive down the property values in the area. Some women nearby even gossiped that the man looked gentle and wondered why the girl would act so agitated toward him. As Geu Roo cleans the apartment, he discovers the truth through her things. She was a gentle, kind-hearted kindergarten teacher who always prepared thoughtful gifts for everyone around her. Geu Roo plans to deliver the gifts she had prepared for her colleagues and students, but Sang-gu isn't in the mood to go. Later, Sang-gu enters the empty house to scrape the dried blood off the walls. Seeing the blood triggers a traumatic childhood memory, remembers how his mother was frequently abused by his father, leaving the walls of their home stained with her blood. Paralyzed by his past, Sang-gu loses control of his emotions and begins frantically tearing down the wallpaper in a desperate frenzy. Meanwhile, Geu Roo visits the kindergarten. The principal initially doesn't want to accept the victim's final gifts, but Geu Roo explains that Seon-gyang, the teacher, had carefully chosen specific stories that matched the personality of every single child. Hearing how meaningful the gifts were, the principal has no choice but to accept them. Next, Geu Roo delivers a bag of baby clothes that Seon-gyang had hand-knitted herself to a pregnant colleague. When the friend sees the gift her devoted friend had prepared, she breaks down in tears. She reveals a chilling detail. The teacher had actually met her ex-boyfriend at this friend's wedding. Ever since that day, the man had obsessively pursued Seon-gyang, but she didn't like him and had been doing everything in her power to avoid him. His constant stalking turned her life into a psychological nightmare, but the worst part was that no one believed her, and no one stepped up to help. As the man became more obsessed, threatening her and even getting physical, Seon-gyang's mental state began to spiral. Under that crushing pressure, she finally decided to quit her job just to get away from the school and him. Tragically, it was this very decision that ended up costing her her life. After hearing the other teacher's story, Geu Roo couldn't sleep a wink. His mind kept racing back to the strange details he noticed inside Seon-gyang's apartment. He spent the night pacing the living room and muttering to himself, which eventually woke Sang-gu up. Without knowing what was going on, the uncle was dragged back to the crime scene once again. The two of them searched the entire place for a camera. They had found a user manual for a surveillance camera among her things, but the device itself was nowhere to be found. This missing piece of the puzzle made Geu Roo incredibly anxious. Finally, their persistence paid off. They found the camera hidden away, mounted on top of the air conditioner. Meanwhile, the ex-boyfriend was brought back to the police station for questioning. He put on a pathetic show, faking his grief and recounting the tragedy. His lawyer sat right next to him, aggressively defending him and pushing the police to close the case quickly. But the lead detective saw right through his fake-as-hell act. Finally, unable to hold back her disgust, she called him out and hit play on the footage recovered from the hidden camera. It turned out the ex-boyfriend was a total controlling sociopath. The video showed him forcing his way into her home that night, threatening her, and then using a fruit knife to fatally attack her. He was even caught on camera coldly warning her, "If you want to leave me, you only have two choices. Either I dump you or I kill you." After calling the ambulance, he didn't try to help, he just sat there calmly, watching Seon-gyang pass away in agonizing pain. With the undeniable evidence right in front of his face, his nice guy mask finally slipped, revealing the monster underneath. As the interrogation wrapped up, the police shook Geu Roo's hand to thank him. While the officers were escorting the killer out, Geu Roo held up a letter written by one of the kindergarten students for Seon-gyang. Everyone loved this teacher because she was so gentle and sincere. Geu Roo looked the killer in the eye and repeated one thing over and over. "You didn't actually love Seon-gyang." The female detective handed Geu Roo her business card. She realized that he possessed observation skills and a memory far beyond a normal person, along with a strict adherence to rule traits that are essentially superpowers for solving crimes. She expressed her hope to collaborate with him again in the future. Geu Roo took one glance at the card and handed it back, simply because he had already memorized every single piece of information on it. The scene shifts, and Namu happens to see Sang-gu walking out of a real estate office. She sneaks inside to do some digging and is shocked to discover that Sang-gu has put Geu Roo's house up for sale. This makes Namu realize that the uncle can't be trusted at all. She finds a surveillance camera and hides it near Sang-Gu's tent to eavesdrop on his moves, then decides to tail him until nightfall. Sang-Gu heads out again. On the street, he comes across a scene where a girl is being beaten by her boyfriend. Even though he had seen this couple many times before and never interfered, this time was different. Sang-Gu stepped in front of the abusive man, stopping him from hurting the woman any further. The man's behavior triggered something deep inside him. Fueled by rage, Sang-Gu gave the guy a brutal beating, and from the shadows, Namu witnessed the entire thing. The next day, Namu pulls Geu Roo aside and asks, "Does your uncle ever hit you?" But Geu Roo just shakes his head no. Meanwhile, Sang-Gu continues his mysterious routine of sneaking out of the house every night at midnight. When he finally returns home covered in fresh injuries, Geu Roo, the sweet and patient nephew, carefully treats Sang-Gu's wounds and even tells him stories to comfort him. He's truly a good kid. However, Sang-Gu remains cold and distant toward him. Namu is the only one who senses that something is seriously wrong, so she decides to tail him. That night, Namu follows Sang-Gu down a flight of stairs and into an underground boxing club. She's shocked to see that the man standing in the ring is none other than Sang-Gu. Eavesdropping on the crowd, she learns that his old nickname used to be Nightmare. But the reality in the ring is the total opposite. Sang-Gu is just standing there, taking a brutal, bloody beating. For a fleeting second, Namu catches a glimpse of the profound loneliness and emptiness in the uncle's eyes. She finally understands the source of all his injuries. It turns out Sang-Gu had been hiding this secret ever since he moved in with Geu Roo, believing his problems were his own to deal with. A few days later, a young patrol officer who is a friend of Namu's stops by her family's shop, right as she's biking Geu Roo back home. Namu's mother has never liked the fact that her daughter spends all day hanging out with Geu Roo. In her mind, this young, successful police officer is the perfect match for her daughter, so the moment they meet, she starts aggressively playing matchmaker. After the officer leaves, Namu and her mother get into a heated argument over Geu Roo. Her mother sees Geu Roo as a disabled person who needs constant care, and she's frustrated that her daughter is acting like his free nanny. At that moment, Geu Roo steps in and seriously explains to the mother that Namu doesn't have to do a single thing for him at his house, and he politely asks her not to be angry with her daughter. The scene shifts to a hospital lobby where a violent scuffle is breaking out. A patient is threatening a nurse, demanding a specific medication, when a young doctor steps in to negotiate, using the meds as a bargaining chip. Just as it looks like the situation is under control, the nurse screams and breaks free, causing everything to spiral out of control. In the ensuing struggle, the patient slashes the doctor's carotid artery, and the young man dies on the spot. Back to our Geu Roo's next mission is to clear out the belongings of that very doctor. Since the doctor came from an incredibly wealthy and old money family, the pay for the job is extremely generous. This doctor had a brilliant future and was incredibly handsome. He should have had a long, happy life, but because of that tragic accident, he's gone, leaving everyone in mourning. Geu Roo enters the room and realizes it's the most organized place he's ever cleaned. After neatly packing the keepsakes into a box, he discovers a love letter the doctor had written to the person he loved. Geu Roo immediately takes the letter to the doctor's parents. He needs to know who the recipient is so he can deliver it, as it's the final wish of the deceased. But in a shocking turn of events, the letter is turned into a pile of ashes within seconds. The moment the father reads just the first few lines, he immediately throws it into the fire. Geu Roo desperately plunges his hand into the flames to save the letter, burning the back of his hand in the process. Sang-Gu is frantic with worry and tries to get his nephew to give up on the burnt remains. But Geu Roo is stubborn. He carefully gathers the charred fragments of paper and brings them home. Geu Roo had read just enough of the letter to feel the soul-crushing depth of the doctor's love for this person. At the same time, the trio overheard a conversation between the doctor's parents and put the pieces together. His parents had been dead, set against his relationship. After being forced to break up, the young doctor had fallen into a dark place, losing all hope. That's why Move to Heaven made it their mission to deliver this letter to its rightful owner, no matter what. They discovered several concert tickets among his belongings, leading them to believe his lover was likely a musician. Finding a cello endpin anchor in the room made them even more certain. Finally, Geu Roo tracked down a ticket for an upcoming performance. However, there was a catch. The concert featured 4 different musicians. Initially, they assumed the doctor's lover was one of the women in the group. When they arrived at the concert hall, the staff blocked their entrance. Geu Roo started muttering over and over that he needed to use the bathroom, so the staff eventually let them through. Sang-Gu actually thought Geu Roo was clever enough to lie his way in, but in reality, the kid genuinely had to go. While Geu Roo was in the restroom, Namu and Sang-Gu started searching elsewhere for the cellists. Meanwhile, the male cellist was on his way to the performance when he saw the news of the doctor's passing. He couldn't stop the tears from streaming down his face. Back with Geu Roo, the team realized that upon hearing such devastating news, the lover would surely head to the one place filled with their most precious memories. Geu Roo thought back to every item he found in the doctor's room, and eventually led them to the place where it all began, the hospital where the doctor used to work. Seeing the doctor's memorial photo in a corner of the hospital, the cellist was hit with a wave of agonizing pain as he remembered the night they first met. It was Christmas Eve, a night that was both ordinary and life-changing for Dr. Soo-jin. That night, a man named Park was rushed to the ER after a car accident. But even as he lay on the stretcher, he was hysterical, only worrying about whether his cello was broken. Dr. Soo-jin tried to calm him down, but Park was out of control. The doctor finally had to snap at him, telling him to focus on his treatment first, because only by staying healthy could he continue to perform for his audience. After the emergency procedure, Park began playing his cello right there in the hospital room. Dr. Soojin was instantly drawn in by the melody and asked if Park could play a piece just for him. Park smiled and played a beautiful Christmas song. In that moment, surrounded by the music, they fell deeply in love and became a couple. Park was the type of person who loved with his whole soul and wanted to be open about their relationship. On the other hand, Dr. Soojin was quite conservative and, unfortunately, a bit weak-willed. At one point, Soojin learned that Park wanted to go abroad to study, and he was genuinely happy for his partner. Park suggested they both leave the country together to escape the social pressures and start a life of true freedom. However, when the day of departure finally arrived, Soojin got cold feet. He couldn't find the strength to stand up to his parents, so he only went to the airport to say his final goodbyes. Soojin called himself a coward, admitted he could only follow his parents' wishes to get married and have children, and confessed he simply wasn't as brave as Park. Heartbroken and deeply disappointed, Park was forced to grab his luggage and leave South Korea all alone. The three of them head to the hospital and manage to track down Park. After introducing themselves, Geu Roo hands over Soojin's final keepsakes. Inside the box are international plane tickets and a pair of matching rings, the very same rings Park had once mentioned. At that moment, Geu Roo recites the contents of the letter Soojin had written. It turns out that because of his love for Park, Soojin had been trying his absolute best to become a braver person. At the concert that night, Park wears Soojin's ring on stage and publicly declares his feelings for him. He vows to cherish their love until his very last breath. Then, he begins to perform the same Christmas song he had played for Soojin all those years ago. After the concert, Geu Roo turns to Sang-gu and asks a profound question. Why were Soojin and Park so talented, yet their parents still forbade them from being together? Sang-gu's answer is cynical. Maybe every parent just hopes their child won't be different from everyone else. Geu Roo immediately pushes back, saying his own father never once told him he wasn't good enough. This conversation sends Uncle Sang-gu spiraling into his own memories. We see a glimpse of his past. There was a young man he once loved and cared for deeply, but that man is now in a vegetative state in a hospital. Every time Sang-gu remembers that his own fists were what sent that boy into a coma, his heart aches with unbearable guilt. The next morning, the uncle-nephew duo heads back to work as usual. This time, the client isn't just one person, but an elderly couple who passed away on the very same day. The husband was an old man who worked as a security guard at an apartment complex. Despite his age, he was constantly bossed around and forced to do heavy labor by the residents. 3 days ago, he was involved in a minor car accident while running an errand to fetch golf clubs for a manager. When he was taken to the hospital for a checkup, he received a devastating diagnosis. He had cancer. The old man was stunned by the news, but he remained remarkably calm. Ignoring the doctor's pleas for him to start treatment, he firmly refused. Instead, he went to visit his devoted wife, who was also critically ill and could pass away at any moment. The two of them had once made a vow to stay together in life and in death. They made the heavy decision to end their lives together using the sleeping pills the hospital had prescribed for the wife. To an outsider, this act might seem insane. Sang-gu, in particular, felt it was unfair to the wife. How could he take away her right to live, even if she was terminally ill? As Geu Roo's team finishes cleaning the room and gathering the keepsakes, they realize they have no one to give the box to, as the couple had no surviving relatives. Fortunately, a social worker named Sun Yu Rim arrives and introduces herself as a friend of theirs. She is deeply offended by Sang-gu's harsh judgment of the old man. She explains that the husband was one of the kindest souls she ever knew, so kind. In fact, that a young girl once saved up her own money to buy him an air conditioner just so he could stay cool in the summer. While inspecting the home, they accidentally discover a hidden path leading to a greenhouse room. The space is filled with lush greenery and vibrant fresh flowers. Because the old man's wife loved looking at flowers, he had spent his life growing and searching for the most beautiful blooms just so they could admire them together. Seeing the room overflowing with flowers gives Geu Roo a beautiful idea. He decides to take all of them to the couple's funeral to use as decorations, as a final tribute to their lives. The couple left this world together with no family to hold a service for them. But according to social welfare laws, a social worker is appointed to organize the funeral, and that person is none other than Yu Rim. The funeral for the elderly couple was heartbreakingly silent. There wasn't a single soul in attendance except for Geu Roo, Uncle Sang-gu, and the social worker, Yu Rim. Meanwhile, in the room right next door, it was a completely different world. That funeral was packed with people, overflowing with eye-catching lavish floral wreaths. We soon find out it's the funeral for the mother of a major construction company's chairman. Geu Roo had brought all the greenery from the couple's home to decorate their space, but Sang-gu still felt the service looked way too pathetic and bare. Seeing the stark contrast between the two rooms, the uncle decided to take matters into his own hands. She straight up swiped a massive grand wreath from the fancy funeral next door. Geu Roo let out a panicked yelp, forcing Sang-gu to quickly cover the kid's mouth. At that moment, Geu Roo stared at the company name printed on the stolen wreath and suddenly remembered the old man's dusty business card. It turns out the old man was once the vice president of that very company, meaning the people in the crowded room next door were actually his former colleagues. Without wasting a second, Geu Roo grabbed a stack of the old man's business cards and started handing them out to the staff in the neighboring room. Everyone looked at the cards with total confusion, because the name meant nothing to them. And that makes sense, those cards were printed all the way back in 1981. But just as everyone was scratching their heads, the chairman of the conglomerate appeared. When he heard Geu Roo read the old man's name and saw the vintage business card, his face changed instantly. He remembered This was his former mentor, the man who had guided him and given him the opportunity to become the powerful leader he is today. And just like that, the tiny, empty funeral room was suddenly swarmed with people. Every single employee from the old man's former company came to pay their respects, led by the high-profile chairman himself. The chairman couldn't stop thanking Geu Roo, clutching that old business card tightly in his hand. Standing off to the side, Sang-gu felt a wave of regret for jumping to conclusions and labeling the old man as selfish. He finally understood. Everyone has their own hidden pain and their own reasons for the choices they make. Later that night, Sang-gu received a frantic call from the hospital. The young boy who had been in a coma for years was in critical condition. Sang-gu raced to the hospital like a madman. The boy's younger sister told him that in his current state, he needed emergency surgery immediately. This triggered a memory from 10 years ago when Sang-gu first met this boy, whose name was Suchial. Back then, Suchial was just a student being brutally bullied by school thugs until Sang-gu stepped in and saved him. Deeply grateful and idolizing Sang-gu, the kid begged to be taught how to box, despite Sang-gu's constant refusals. Eventually, moved by Suchial's persistence and sincerity, Sang-gu agreed to train him. Over time, the two became inseparable, treating each other like real brothers. For someone like Sang-gu who grew up starved for familial affection, this kid was the only light in his dark life. Back in the present, the uncle is determined to scrape together enough money to save his ill-fated brother. That's the real reason he's still forced to work for that wicked woman. She knew he'd come crawling back, so she had already laid out a trap. She forced him to sign mortgage papers for the house, the very house where his nephew, Geu Roo, is currently living. On top of that, he had to agree to every single one of her demands. Desperate to save his friend, Sang-gu signed everything without a second thought. But by the time he grabbed the cash and sprinted back to the hospital, it was too late. Suchial was gone. The uncle broke down in gut-wrenching sobs. He felt that Suchial's death was entirely his fault. Years ago, Suchial had become a star athlete in the boxing world, stacking up trophies left and right. But eventually, he decided to hang up the gloves to start his own business. Sang-gu, of course, backed him up. Getting punched for a living isn't exactly a sustainable career path. At that time, Sang-gu was prepping for a massive high-stakes fight that promised a huge payday. He was training like a beast, having no idea that his opponent was actually his closest friend. That evil lady boss had intentionally rigged the brackets to pit the two of them against each other. Sang-gu was absolutely floored when he stepped into the ring and realized his opponent was Suchial. The deal for the match was dirty. Sang-gu was forced to score a knockout in the 7th round, per his agreement with that woman. Suchial was in the same boat. Never imagined his final match would be against his own big brother. They both knew they were being played, but they had to grit their teeth and fight because they desperately needed the money, especially Suchial, who was scraping together capital for his new shop. At first, Sang-gu tried to hold back and avoid landing anything dangerous. But under the soul-crushing pressure of the lady boss and the bloodthirsty crowd, he lost his cool and started unleashing lethal, bone-crushing punches. Suchial was just as skilled, but between his old injuries and his refusal to hurt the man he looked up to, he ended up getting knocked out with life-threatening injuries. The arena turned into pure chaos as Suchial fought for his life. In the middle of the madness, Sang-gu spotted his brother Jong-gu in the crowd. His brother was desperately screaming his name, but Sang-gu acted like he didn't even see him. Sang-gu ended up behind bars for years for causing severe bodily harm. Geu Roo's father visited the prison countless times, but Sang-gu refused to see him every single time. And the cruelest twist of fate? The day he finally walked free was the exact same day he found out his brother had passed away. Sang-gu convinced himself he had to leave the house before he brought any more trouble to his nephew's doorstep. He sent a text to Geu Roo saying he was moving on. But clearly, he didn't understand Geu Roo's personality. If something isn't crystal clear, the kid will chase the truth to the ends of the earth. Geu Roo started plastering missing person posters all over the neighborhood, but luck wasn't on his side. He got snatched up by the lady boss's thugs. She stared at Geu Roo with a wicked grin, snapped a photo, and sent it straight to Sang-gu. Sang-gu was working at a construction site when he saw the text. Knowing his nephew was in danger, he sprinted to the underground fight club. Seeing the kid being held by a group of massive thugs, he didn't hesitate for a second and beat the living daylights out of them. He only stopped when the lady boss called off her dogs to negotiate. She was thrilled to discover that Sang-gu had a nephew. It meant she had a brand new weakness to exploit. She demanded one last major fight. If he won, she'd return the house papers and promised to never bother them again. Just like that, his plan to leave failed, and Sang-gu was back by Geu Roo's side. The next day, it was time for Geu Roo's scheduled trip to the amusement park. This was a long-standing tradition he had with his father, and even though his dad was gone, Geu Roo was going to follow the routine exactly as planned. Feeling uneasy, Uncle Sang-gu secretly tailed him. Inside the park, Geu Roo went into the restroom and found a group of punks smoking and wasting water. He walked right up, shut off the faucet, and started a full-blown lecture on the health risks of smoking. The teens were not happy and were about to go full thug mode on him, but in less than 60 seconds, Uncle Sang-gu had the entire group on their knees, regretting their life choices. After Geu Roo spots him, the uncle plays it cool, acting like their meeting was just a total coincidence. Geu Roo is clearly a bit annoyed, but let's be real, nothing stops Sang-gu. The uncle is surprised to see that Geu Roo isn't actually writing anything. He's just standing there observing. So Sang-gu drags him along to join the fun. They end up hitting every single attraction in the park, and the vibe between them becomes surprisingly warm and close. With a little encouragement from Sang-gu, Geu Roo slowly opens his eyes to see the world spinning around him. and it's a whole new experience for the kid. He's officially hooked and keeps going on rides until the park is about to close, leaving only when he absolutely has to. Sang-Goo actually finds himself enjoying this, realizing that, at the end of the day, they're the only family each other has left. When the day ends, Geu Roo tells his uncle to head home first because he has one last mandatory task to complete. Of course, Sang-Goo stays in bodyguard mode and follows him in secret. Geu Roo stops at a restaurant to feast on fried chicken, pizza, and black bean noodles. Once he's finished, he catches a taxi to a train station. As Sang-Goo follows him to the familiar platform, a flood of memories comes rushing back. This was the place where he used to sneak away to meet his big brother when they were kids. Back then, on Sang-Goo's birthdays, Geu Roo's father would always surprise him with a tiny cake. Sang-Goo would close his eyes and make a wish. To go to an amusement park every year, go on every ride, and eat his favorite fried chicken and black bean noodles. Geu silently took those wishes to heart. Fast forward to a year after their abusive father passed away, Sang-Goo was about to be sent to an orphanage. Geu met him and promised to pick him up at the station in 2 days, which also happened to be Sang-Goo's birthday. He promised that this time, he would make all those wishes come true. Sang-Goo was over the moon. 2 days later, Sang-Goo sat huddled by a pile of trash, waiting and waiting. But his brother never showed. He sat in that corner for 3 whole days until he finally gave up, feeling completely abandoned. Back in the present, Sang-Goo follows Geu Roo to the platform and finds him standing before a small pile of stones praying. Geu Roo says, "Every year on this day, Dad and I would come here to pray for your peace and happiness." Hearing this, Sang-Goo snaps. He kicks over the rocks in a rage, screaming at his late brother for breaking such a crucial promise. "Why didn't you come?" he chokes out. "Do you have any idea how scared and lonely I was? Why did you leave me?" That's when Geu Roo drops the tragic truth. On the very day they were supposed to meet, the Sampoong department store in Seoul suddenly collapsed due to a construction failure disaster that killed over 500 people and injured thousands. Geu Roo's father was one of the victims trapped in the rubble. He was stuck there for 3 agonizing days before rescuers found him. Because he was critically injured and rushed to the hospital, he missed the appointment with his little brother. From that moment, their fates were sealed. Sang-Goo was sent to the orphanage, while Geu met Geu Roo's mother while recovering in the hospital. He later went on to become a firefighter. After learning the truth, Sang-Goo's attitude softened significantly, though he still keeps his sharp tongue, muttering that Geu was lucky. He hasn't fully forgiven him yet, but the wall between them is starting to crumble. When they get home, Geu Roo takes the souvenirs he bought at the park and puts them in the storage room as part of his routine, and this time, Sang-Goo is paying very close attention. Once he's sure his nephew is fast asleep, Sang-Goo sneaks down to the storage room and uses a key to unlock a hidden cabinet. Inside, he's floored to find a massive, thick stack of missing person flyers. It turns out that for all those years, Geu never once stopped searching for his little brother. But the real heart-shattering discovery is on the bottom shelf, which is lined with rows of Nike shoeboxes. As Sang-Goo stares at the shoes, he's pulled back into a memory from a lifetime ago. He remembers telling his brother that for his birthday, he wanted a pair of Nike shoes and they had to be the real deal, bought from a major mall in Seoul. And that's the tragic missing piece of the puzzle. On the day they were supposed to meet, Geu had gone to the Sampoong department store specifically to buy those shoes for him. That was when the building collapsed. Trapped under tons of concrete, Geu had clutched that shoebox to his chest, his voice a fading whisper as he repeated, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Sang-Goo." Seeing the old, worn-out shoes his brother had managed to pull from the rubble, along with a handwritten birthday card, Sang-Goo's world completely shatters. He's consumed by a wave of gut-wrenching regret, realizing that when his brother finally found him years later, Sang-Goo was in prison and had treated him with nothing but cold contempt, walking away from his visits without a second glance. In the memory, it's as if Geu sensed something, never taking his eyes off his brother. Now, Sang-Goo opens every single box his brother bought for him over the years, his heart feeling like it's being ripped out as he sobs uncontrollably. After a while, he manages to pull himself together, only to find another document in the cabinet. Adoption papers. It turns out Geu isn't Geu's biological son. The boy was adopted. This revelation leaves the uncle in a state of total confusion. For the longest time, he thought Geu was his own flesh and blood. But even though he doesn't show it on the outside, his protective instincts for the kid have already kicked in. The old Sang-Goo would have abandoned the boy in a heartbeat. But after everything they've been through, he started to see Geu as his real family. He decides to act like he never saw the papers, keeping the secret to himself as they continue their daily routine of clearing the belongings of the dead. Their next mission takes them to the room of a young man named Matthew, who passed away from heart disease compounded by excessive drinking. Matthew's story is a tragic one. He was adopted and moved to the US as a child, but was eventually deported back to Korea. He never quite fit in abroad, and he returned to his homeland with one solitary wish, to find his birth mother. Sadly, before he could ever meet her, he was called home to heaven. While cleaning, Sang-Goo notices that Matthew had kept a mountain of magazines and books featuring a famous TV anchor. He wonders if the kid was just an obsessed fan. Among the items is a book that has been torn to shreds. Sang-Goo is about to toss it, but Geu stops him immediate. Every keepsake must be preserved. If a book is torn, Geu will tape it back together. I mean, the kid doesn't even mind cleaning up biohazards, so a few torn pages are nothing to him. Finally, Geu finds an old childhood photo of Matthew standing next to a young woman. Namu and Sang-Goo, claiming they have enough movie-watching experience to rival an 180-minute epic, immediately deduce the truth. The girl in that photo has to be Matthew's birth mother. Looking back at the pile of items in the keepsake room, noticing that every photo and book was linked to the same famous TV anchor, Geu Roo turned to his uncle and Namu and said, "What if we find a way to get close to this woman? She might have some kind of connection to Matthew, maybe she's his birth mother, or perhaps an aunt." So, the trio set off to track down the famous anchor to get some real answers. If she truly was Matthew's mother, Geu Roo could finally complete the mission and hand over the keepsake box. But let's be real, this wasn't going to be an easy task. Since she's a major celebrity, getting close to her was nearly impossible. But hey, that's what the uncle is for. He has a face that's literally thicker than reinforced concrete. Sang-gu drove Geu Roo straight to the anchor's private residence. When she saw two strangers waiting for her, she was blindsided. She wondered if this was payback since she's famous for exposing powerful people on TV. Did they hire thugs to harass her? To avoid the prying eyes of her neighbors, she quickly invited them to a nearby cafe. Geu Roo gently asked the woman, "Do you know Matthew? He passed away recently." He then handed her the old childhood photo. The second she saw the picture of the boy as a child, the anchor couldn't hold back her emotions and burst into tears. It turns out Matthew was the child her family had fostered before he was sent away to a new family for adoption. She had held him and cared for him like her own flesh and blood. It was that deep bond that led Matthew, as an adult, to mistakenly believe she was his biological mother. She recounted a heartbreaking moment. On the day of her book signing, Matthew had shown up, looking anxious and insecure. He gathered all his courage to introduce himself, but the woman didn't recognize the grown man standing before her. She simply signed his book with the words, "Be happy." Matthew looked at those words with a bitter, soul-crushing smile. How could he be happy when the mother he had spent his life searching for didn't even know who he was? The anchor was consumed by regret for not recognizing him sooner. She wondered if things would have ended differently if she had just told him the truth back then. Hearing her story, the uncle couldn't help but think of his own situation with his brother. All those years in prison, Sang-gu avoided Geu Roo's father, not out of hate, but because he was too ashamed that he couldn't become a decent person. Matthew was the same. He was too afraid to face the person who once cared for him because he feared the feeling of being just an abandoned child all over again. Geu Roo successfully delivered the keepsake box. On the way home, a long, heavy silence filled the car. Finally, Geu Roo spoke up, saying that he was just like Matthew, had no idea who his biological parents were. He felt lucky to have found his adoptive father, who loved and raised him with all his heart until the very end. The uncle was stunned to realize that Geu Roo knew all along that he was adopted. Seeing how calm Geu Roo was while speaking about his origins, the uncle felt an even deeper surge of affection for him. The kid might look fragile, but he's actually incredibly brave and strong, always showing his truest emotions. As the day of the big fight loomed closer, Sang-gu was determined to win. The house papers and Geu Roo's safety were his absolute priority. That morning, the uncle even went into the kitchen to personally cook breakfast, which immediately made Geu Roo suspicious. "Are you about to die or something? Why are you making such a huge feast?" Geu Roo asked. The uncle barked back, "Hey kid, your uncle is the world boxing champion. I'm not gonna kick the bucket that easily." The lady boss, puffing on her cigarette, had bet every cent she had on Sang-gu, ordering him to win at all costs. Not wanting Geu Roo to worry, he quietly slipped away to the arena. But before leaving, he did something he's never done before. He asked Namu to look after Geu Roo. Sensing something was off, Namu went inside to ask Geu Roo what was happening. He recounted a phone conversation he'd overheard the night before. "If you want me in that ring, you return the house papers and stay the hell away from my nephew." Realizing the stakes, the two youngsters immediately rushed out to save him. Back at the arena, Sang-gu's opponent was a monster of a man covered in tattoos. You could tell, just by looking at him, that this was going to be a bloodbath. The two of them slammed into each other, going full beast mode. While the uncle was fighting for his life in the ring, Geu Roo and Namu weren't just sitting around. Namu was shocked that Geu Roo not only knew the location but also remembered the passcode to the secret arena. Since he had been kidnapped there before, the code was burned into his memory. At the same time, Geu Roo had already called the female detective to provide backup. Back in the ring, things are looking grim. Our uncle is getting absolutely wrecked, taking one hit after another. Seeing his precious nephew in the crowd only makes him more anxious. And to make matters worse, his opponent plays dirty, leaving Sang-gu severely injured and hanging by a thread. Terrified that his uncle might not make it out alive, Geu Roo's brilliant mind kicks into gear. He sprints over to the circuit breaker, hesitates for just a fraction of a second, and then he kills the power. The entire arena is plunged into total darkness. Right on cue, the police storm the building, sending the spectators into a panicked frenzy. The lady boss is livid because her illegal business just went up in smoke, but there's nothing she can do. She knows if the cops catch her, she's going straight to prison. In the middle of the chaos, the two kids move fast. They throw a thick blanket over Sang-gu to hide him and rush him straight to the hospital. Talk about a close call. Sang-gu is deeply moved by the rescue. The bond he feels for Geu Roo has grown into something real. He doesn't just want to be a guardian on paper anymore. He wants to be a real uncle and stay by his side forever. But of course, life isn't that simple. His brother's lawyer shows up to discuss the final guardianship arrangement. When the lawyer asks Geu Roo how he feels, the boy just keeps his head down and stays silent. He runs to his room and locks the door tight. For a kid like Geu Roo, all he ever wanted was a complete family, but both his adoptive parents are gone. Now he's living with his uncle, but he's terrified that Sang-gu doesn't actually want to be there with him. Later that night, when Geu Roo refuses to come out, Sang-gu loses his patience and kicks the door down only to find the room empty. Geu Roo had escaped through the window, and he took his father's ashes with him. Frantic, Sung-Goo searches for clues and spots a photo of his brother Jong-Goo in his firefighter uniform. He rushes to his brother's old fire station to dig for info, and that's where Geu Roo's true past is finally revealed. We go back to a snowy day years ago. Firefighter Han Jong-Yu Geu Roo's dad pulled a tiny helpless newborn from the ruins of a collapsed building. The baby was so small and fragile it broke his heart. Since Jong-Gu and his wife couldn't have children of their own, they adopted the boy, believing he was a literal gift from heaven. Geu Roo grew up surrounded by nothing but pure love. Even when he was diagnosed with Asperger's, his father remained the most patient and loving man on earth, helping Geu Roo find his footing in a world that felt so alien to him. Geu Roo, clutching the urn of ashes, heads to the aquarium, the place his dad used to take him when he was little. He's desperate to hear his father's voice one more time, but there's only silence. He used to tell himself his dad was still there, but now, the crushing weight of loneliness and emptiness has finally caught up to him. Just as he's about to spiral, his uncle catches up and grips his hand, offering him the comfort he so desperately needs. After finally coming to terms with the truth, Geu Roo accepts that his father is truly gone. He begins the painful task of clearing his dad's room. While going through his things, he finds his father's phone and discovers a massive collection of photos and a video his dad had recorded for him. In the video, his father softly tells him that he will always live on in Geu Roo's heart. He tells him to live a healthy, peaceful life. Watching that message brings Geu Roo a sense of peace he hasn't felt in a long time. He makes a silent vow to live well and keep moving forward, just like his dad asked. The 3-month trial period for Sung-Goo finally comes to an end. Sitting in the lawyer's office, the once rebellious thug is now sitting perfectly still, pouring his heart out. He admits that by any objective standard, he's not qualified to be a guardian. But his time with Geu Roo has changed him. He realized he's starving for a family. He wants to protect Geu Roo and continue their work at Move to Heaven. The lawyer smiles and tells Sung-Goo not to worry, gets to stay as the legal guardian because that was Geu Roo's wish all along. From now on, they have each other, and no one has to feel abandoned ever again. Fast forward 3 weeks. Geu Roo is on the job when he meets a girl. She looks like a high schooler, but she speaks with a surprisingly mature tone. She has a request that catches everyone off guard. She wants to book a Move to Heaven service for herself. She explains that she knows she doesn't have much time left. Geu Roo is stunned. Usually, it's the family that calls for the service, not the person who is about to pass. What kind of situation is this? Will Geu Roo accept this bizarre and heartbreaking request?